Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Muchi Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Vedanta Vedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanattam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. And we begin with our Q&A class. As far as you know, there is one question here from our official questions producer, Dave. So anybody else has anything, or we should begin with Dave? Okay. So Dave said that I have been reflecting on objects, on that statement that says that objects are in consciousness, and consciousness is not in the objects. So objects are in consciousness. Consciousness is not in the object. It's a concept differentiated from a Christian belief, for example, which says that God is in us all, and we are in God. So why is this statement, this distinction, so important in Vedanta? Does this explain? There is somebody is talking. Does the explanation have to do with discerning or discriminating what's real from what is not real? Yes, of course. That's what it is when we say that mithya is in consciousness, but consciousness is not in mithya. The objects are within consciousness, but consciousness is not within the object. It means to say that consciousness does not depend on mithya. It's not really, does not have a dependable relationship with mithya. Consciousness is free and independent from mithya. The objects appears within consciousness. Okay, when we use this expression, I am, like Lord Krishna saying to Arjuna, I am in all of this, but none of this is in me. Meaning to say that no, all of this is within me, but I'm not within all of this in mithya. It means to say that all of this enjoys a dependable existence, because they are not none other than myself. They exist within my own existence, my own conscious existence. Everything is just a superimposition on me. So the best way to understand this, we go to the metaphor of the screen, the cinema screen, and the movie, the projections, the images project one after the other, creating the illusion of action and so on, image and action. So we have that. So what is the real thing there? Is the screen. These projections, they depend on the screen for their existence. So if there is no screen on which it's project, so those light rays are not going to produce image. You understand? So they are just going to remain invisible. So they depend on the screen. Okay? So all of this is in the screen, but the screen is not in any of that. You understand? It appears that they are mutually dependable, but they are not. One principle is free and independent. The other depends on the screen. You understand? So all these images, they are in the screen of consciousness, They are created by consciousness and they appear within consciousness, okay? But consciousness is not in them, meaning to say that consciousness does not depend on them. It appears as if consciousness has a very intimate relationship with it, you know, and it does, but it does not, because consciousness is associationless. It does not have any associations, any relationship, but due to Maya, consciousness appears as pervading or as permeating or as the screen on which Mithya is superimposed. Okay? So therefore, all these objects, they are within the scope of consciousness, they are illumined, they are known, no? They are revealed in consciousness by consciousness, and they are superimposition of names and forms in consciousness, but consciousness is not really the object, because conscious is the reality in which those apparent realities are known, are seen, are revealed. You understand? So the reality and the no reality, they belong to two orders of reality, meaning Satya and Mithya, and they don't really coexist. There's no relationship of coexistence, because in the next sentence you say, like, this concept is not shared by many other religious principles or religious circles, or even spiritual circles. Yes, it's not, because a lot of these spiritual circles and religious circles, they believe that duality is reality and consciousness is real, but the world is real as well, you know. Vedanta, the Upanishads, reveals to us that it's not real. You understand? The world is not really real. The only reality is the light, the illuminator, this conscious light of revealing power, of illumination, or witnessing conscious existence principle, in which this phenomenon called the world is known, okay? So these people from these religions, they are not aware of these statements of the Upanishads declaring that the nature of reality is non-duality, that the only reality is consciousness, okay? So they don't know this. This is the core of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, yes. So, and then you end say, like, can we not find something common, some ground, a common ground between what Vedanta says and the others? The others, you mean these other philosophies, the religions and so on. So we need to understand that most of these religions, they refer God. The God that they refer to is not real itself, you understand? So the religions, they don't know what Brahman is. They don't know what, you know, Satchitananda, the nature of Brahman is. You understand? Chaitanya, pure consciousness, okay? So they don't bring Satya into the equation. The whole process, the whole relationship, or the whole spiritual attitude they have is within Mithya. They take God to be real. They take the universe to be real, you know, and all objects to be real, and the jiva to be real. And then they see that there is God. And then the people around this circle, they say, as you say here, that they say that, what is that? When the Christians, for example, in their beliefs, they say that God is in me and we are in God, right? So we need to understand that statement. When we say that God is within me, huh? This is a real dangerous statement, because I have met many people who believing that they have their own private personal God, you know, my God against your God, my God guides me and does this for me and does that for me, you understand? So as if I have God. No, I mean, we don't have God. We have just a subtle body enlivening this body to make it to become a human jiva, you understand? So I have a subtle body that lives, the pranas and everything, all of that belongs to the subtle body. You know, the subtle body is going to activate this physical body and turn me into a living human jiva. Okay, so within me, there is the subtle body and the causal body, you understand? And I shine because of this subtle body attached or associate with this physical body. And then I appear as a living being, a jiva, chitta baza, or reflected consciousness, the jiva, yeah? Chitta baza, as it appears in the Panchadas. So this reflection, which is the jiva, we could say that my soul or the subtle body is within my physical body, we could say, or we can take God to be Brahman, okay, consciousness, and then we say consciousness is within me because consciousness pervades everything, including this physical body. You understand? But the Christians, they don't understand Brahman. They don't understand, you know, the subtle body. They just believe that everyone is a soul, and God lives in the heart of all souls. Yet this statement, God lives within my heart, is a good statement because it means to say that I think of God, I have God in my life, you know, I understand God, you know, I bring God into account in my life, you know. So it's a good statement, but we need to understand that it just means that I have God within me. I have God in my heart, in my mind, you know, I think of God. That is a good statement. But we are all in God is a proper statement, meaning to say that Ishvara, which is not really real, God, which is not really real, you know, is that in which all jivas, you know, are part, integral part. So all jivas, all the objects are integral part of God, of Ishvara, as the manifest universe. So when God manifests, you remember God is the efficient cause or the intelligent cause, the energetic cause, the material cause, and each is also the manifest universe. You understand? All sentient and insentient beings. So everything is within God as the manifest. And then we can say, as you said there, so God is within us, and we all are in God. Yes, we all live within the grace of God, the power of God, Maya Shwara. You know, we are just integral parts of this apparent manifestation called Mithya. You understand? So that is a better statement. But if we say that God lives within me, and then we need to understand that this me means Satchitananda, Brahman, because only the Jnani can say that, yes, God, Ishvara is within me, Jiva is within me, and Jagat is within me, and I am the only reality, Satchitananda, consciousness, existence, infinite, limitless consciousness, existence. Then we can say God is within me, but as Brahman, as pure consciousness. We are in God means to say, I, Jiva, I'm an integral part of this manifest apparent reality, which is governed by Maya / Ishwara, howsoever we want to see it. You understand the distinction there, Dave? Okay, it all depends this I, to what this I refers to, if it is to our fundamental, free, limitless, unconcerned nature as consciousness, awareness, or it is our body-mind construct, meaning to say the jiva. Yeah? So it depends. So jiva is within Ishwara, but Ishwara is within jiva. If jiva understand that he is Brahman and not the body-mind construct, you understand?
Yeah, I do understand. I can have this discussion, and I can have a meaningful discussion, I think, with other Yanis, all right, or at least people who have been exposed to Vedanta like this group, and where it becomes, to me, the question is really in being able to engage with other people, and this is kind of a common theme for me, and why I worry about this, I don't know. It's just a vasana, I guess, but. Um, so it's just how do I engage with people when they're clearly expressing a duality perspective, and I'm coming at it from a non-dual. And so I had this experience, and it's not I'm not trying to convince I'm not trying to convince people or anything. I'm not want to teach. I don't want to convert. I don't want to do any of those things, but just being able to be, in union or in communion with others who are not yanis, who are not who have ignorance to to this means to self-knowledge, and that's what I'm really talking about. And so I was just kind of asking you,
Understood. Understood.
having that conversation with others, and I think it's really, and that's really helpful. What you said to me is just that they're sitting in duality. Not that I had to teach them about duality, but just how are we different, and what's our perspectives are different, and that helps me. So
Yeah, that's what you need to know, and you need to understand, Dave, that the best way to relate to the people who do not understand Vedanta was never introduced to these notions of the Upanishads, people who lives from the firm conviction that the reality is duality and that God is reality, and God is, some principle, some force, or some divine entity. So when we relate to the people on that level, we need to respect their limitation. You understand? Their perspective, respect it, and relate to them on that level. You understand? And then you can introduce what? Karma yoga. Yes, we all live, we all children of God. There is not only one child like Jesus. We are all children of God, and and we all live within God. You understand? And then when you say God, oh, and God lives within me, of course. So we all should keep God in our hearts, in our mind. We need to understand God. We need to develop this vision that God is present in everything we do, because God is this force, is the pranas, and everything God. And then you can introduce some concepts of Karma Yoga, that God is doing everything for the jiva all the time. You understand? So you need to somehow relate to them on their level, because if you start trying to present non-duality to them, it's not going to work. Usually, it does not work. You understand? Unless they are really like, oh, what more? You understand?
Uh, yeah, I do. I mean, for me, thank you. That's a great point to not focus on that, but where do we come in common, and what we can really talk about is karma yoga, and karma yoga is really a commonality that can happen across all religions and across all people, and they don't even have to believe in God, I don't think, in order to understand or conceptualize and be able to talk to karma yoga in the terms that they can understand. And so that makes sense. The only problem is, of course, is that I think most people I talk to anyway have a different definition of karma. It's an incomplete, it's a fatalistic kind of thing, and I have to explore with them a little bit about expanding their concept of karma and
Yeah.
what karma really is.
Totally. So it's very clear that you have a vasana for teaching, and I know that, observed that for long ago, and there is nothing wrong about that. It needs to be used for a good purpose, and you do already some sort of teachings in your profession. So you just have to be careful with Vedanta that we are not out there to recruit people. We are there just to live our lives, and if somebody cross our ways, and somebody with a spiritual vasana, and then we can share some of our knowledge, but being very careful not to overdo it, not to be too invasive, and because that is going to, people are going to shut down, and they may even become a little bit unfriendly with you if you say things that they don't want to hear, they are not ready to hear, they are going to conflict with their own ideas. I almost never talk about Vedanta as I go about with my life, especially since I came to Brazil, and if I'm just living with people that are not part of the circle, my Vedanta circle here, I hardly say, and I even avoid to say what I do, but sometimes they ask, so what I do, what do you do? I say, oh, I teach. And then when they ask, what do you teach? And then still, I try to be as vague as possible. No, it's a kind of philosophy. Okay. Why? Because I don't want to go into that and start saying things that they are not really into, open and available and interested, most of all, you know. So, and then sometimes here and there, and then somebody say, well, but what do you teach? And then I say, and when I see that people, they have already spiritual varsity, I say, oh, it's Vedanta. And then they say, oh, Vedanta, oh, wow, I want to know a little bit more, you know, and then I send some links and so on. Okay. So, but I don't preach anybody about Vedanta unless they really insist. Just like Ramji used to say, you know, just wait to see if they really want to know about non-duality and Upanishads and all of that, because sometimes it's too much for anybody, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you.
Okay. How was that, Lynn? Lately, you had some of your relatives from, I don't remember. So did you teach them good Vedanta the past few days?
No. No. But on this topic, the thing that took me a step beyond my understanding before was really getting what reality is, you know, that ever-present, non-changing. And in my Christian background, it stopped at God. You know, for so many people, it just stops at God.
Yeah.
And you don't see God in the context of reality and apparent reality.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to grasp. You know, your mind has to be wide open to pick that up.
Yeah, and very subtle.
Yeah, it is subtle. And it has humongous repercussions about everything. But until you're ready to go down to that more subtle level and open your mind to that, then those discussions are difficult.
Yeah, they are difficult or even impossible without that upsetting people's moods, you know.
Yeah, but it seems to me that is the fundamental point. What is non-duality? You know. So
what is non-duality, Lynn?
Darn it. It is what we were talking about, that there is there's no other. I remember when I first had that experience that there is no other, it scared the hell out of me. I jumped right back to my jivahood and said, oh my God, no, there is no other. How could they? Lonely. But yeah, still integrating, but everything within.
Yeah.
Not even within. You can't talk about it.
No, you can talk, but you need to contemplate until you really understand, because when we talk of non-duality, this understanding is only possible to the extent, to the degree that we understand our fundamental essential nature, not as the mind or the intellect, but as consciousness. We need to be properly established in this understand. I am consciousness. I'm not the mind. I'm not the intellect. I am this, the light of the illuminator. You understand? So I am this conscious existence that shines in my intellect. Once we have that clear, and then it's relatively easy to extend that knowledge and understand that everything is only this. You understand? Everything is only consciousness shining in all sentient beings, and not really shining as conscious being, but existing in all insentient beings as well, inert object. So it's easier to understand that everything is consciousness, but it has to begin with I am consciousness, I'm not the intellect. This knowledge has to be clear and properly, grounded, firm, solid, so that you have no doubt in regards to your real identity, nature, And then once you know I am the consciousness here, and then you know that every other living creature is shining with the same consciousness, which is the nature of everything. Even the inert objects, they are shining with consciousness because, as we know, they are shining with existence. And consciousness and existence are the two sides of the same coin. They're like these two sides of the same coin. So it's the most simple thing to understand non-duality, but it requires us to understand that we are not phenomena, we are not energy, we are not matter, because if we are even the least identified with energy and matter, and then we're gonna see difference. And then we're never going to understand non-duality. We are going to understand plurality, diversity. You understand? So if our identification is slight yet confused with the gunas, with energy, with phenomena, you understand? And then we don't understand non-duality. So it's only possible when we are really properly identified with consciousness. And consciousness is one without a second, and it's easy to understand that, but we need to understand that we are that. Everything, a very nice statement in the new Advaita market, so to speak, that I used to love and enjoy very much, was all there is consciousness, and I am that. You understand? All there is consciousness, and I am that, or all there is consciousness, and you are that, if the guru or the teacher is saying, So we need to understand that everything is consciousness, but most important that I am consciousness, and then I can really be able to understand non-duality, because everything is consciousness, and not only I am that, but all is that. You understand? Yeah. So isn't it simple, Karen, to understand non-duality? Very simple, huh? We just need to find the common denominator, the common ground, that which is the ground of all beings, to use another expression from the Neo-Advaita movement, the ground of all beings, consciousness, the ground of all beings, you understand? So when we go to the ground, to the bottom of our true nature, identity, and then we got into that which is the ground of all beings, consciousness, and then we say, oh yes, it's very simple, non-duality is the nature of everything. Non-duality, oh yes, is clay, is the nature of all objects of clay. No? So we need to go to the very, very bottom in our process of discrimination, rejecting everything which appears as an object within the scope of this conscious awareness. And then as we negate everything, we realize that I am the light, I am the subject. There's nothing subject, conscious existence principle. in which things appear and disappear. And then and only then we understand that everything is this consciousness. This consciousness is bringing about this universe by its appearance association with Mr. Apparent Maya. And then it pervades this universe as the substratum of this, the apparent universe. No? And then we know that in Mithya, the only reality is the substratum, is this, this conscious existence. And then by the power of Maya, variety of names, colors, and forms appear to exist and disappear from our perception, appear and disappear from our perceptions,
Well, it feels like the concept is simple and you think you understand it, but then it's the putting it into practice, or, like Lynn mentioned, really feeling it, or whatever you would say, takes a lot of work. That's what I find.
Yeah, let me put it in a different way. Self-knowledge is the most simple thing to understand. Our true nature is the easiest thing to be understood. What is difficult is to cancel this identification with the not self. The identification, canceling the identification with the body-mind complex is difficult. But understanding that you are consciousness is very easy and simple. What makes it difficult to really live as consciousness is the persistent, hardwired identification with the body-mind as the body-mind. Our difficulty is due to that and that alone. That's why I was saying that once that ignorance somehow, is taken care, wears out, by and by, gradually. And then our identity is more and more solidly established in consciousness as consciousness. And then it's easy. And to begin with, it's very easy to understand that you are consciousness. The difficulty is to cancel the sense of I am the body, the ego sense I am the body and the mind, this identity.
So does karma yoga?
Huh?
Well, if putting it into practice, that's where karma yoga comes into play. So going back to understanding and applying karma yoga then is a way to put this in practice. So be grounded in consciousness and karma yoga.
Yeah, karma yoga is a practice, it is a sadhana, it is a jnana, it's a knowledge kind of practice, it's karma yoga is knowledge yoga after all, because you need to develop a proper understanding of mithya and in the context of the relationship between consciousness, Ishvara, Jiva, and Jagata. So you need to develop this intellectual understanding until, and then by and by this intellectual mithya understanding needs to fructify with a spiritual religious attitude. That's when Ishvara comes into place. This is karma yoga. Karma yoga is excellent for what? For prepare, purifying the mind so that the intellect can develop those subtleties, of discrimination that are going to be required when we really go into the Upanishads, as we do often. Okay, so karma yoga is good, and to prepare the mind so that the mind can understand more clearly, that I am consciousness, and consciousness is the nature, fundamental nature of everything. So this final understanding, it's greatly facilitated by this Ishvara knowledge, or mithya knowledge, or karma dharma Vipassana, yoga, knowledge. You understand? So all of this is what prepares the intellect for the final applications or assimilations or contemplations of these declarations of the Upanishads. This verse originates by the Upanishads. All of this is spiritual practice. All of this is jnana, because it's a spiritual practice that's not based on doing something physically, verbally, or even just mentally, like mental repetition of a mantra or so. So when we come to Vedanta, even with karma, dharma, yoga, we are invited to do that yoga, knowing that it's a yoga of reflection, contemplation, and assimilation of knowledge. Mithya knowledge, Satya knowledge. Mithya and Satya. So this is Vedanta. And this our sadhana, our practice is contemplation, is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Okay? So in karma, in dharma, and in jnana, our practice is assimilation. The final result of this practice is assimilation of this spiritual body of knowledge, which includes Satya and Mithya. Mithya is a little bit more dense, easier to grasp, easier to understand, and easier to fructify with this religious, spiritual attitude that further refines the mind and the intellect. You understand? And then the knowledge of I am Brahman is I am pure consciousness. This is a little bit more subtle because it requires this discrimination between the I intellect and the I pure consciousness. So you need to go into the subtleties of these discriminating faculties of the intellect and begin reject the very intellect that is doing the inquiry. No, I am not. My fundamental nature, and that is done with only successfully with a very, very pure, refined, subtle, sattvic intellect. So all of these, I'm saying that because all of these, Davis, is application or practice of Vedanta knowledge, jnana. We are practicing, we are applying, and application and practicing is nothing but contemplation, reflection, contemplation, and assimilation, you understand? Which begins with listening, reading, watching the videos and so on, exposing the mind to these teachings. And so that this knowledge begins, becomes alive in our intellect. And then it can work for us on a moment-to-moment basis. So that's the process of applying or practicing Vedanta. There is no such thing as practice and theory and practice in Vedanta, as Ramji sometimes says. It's just like either you understand or you don't understand. Either you understand is it's firmly retained or it's not firmly retained. And then it flies with any wind, any breeze, So it's all about that, Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, regardless of the karma, dharma, or jnana knowledge you subject your mind to.
May I ask a question?
Please.
So awareness is, I am awareness. It's always present. And it's when I acknowledge it and allow my attention to be with it that my identity kind of helps. It sort of nudges my identity in that direction. So if you could check me on this, is that appropriate way to practice? I don't want to use the word practice, but
well, I mean, what you say, it's a good tool, it's a good practice. So you're referring to, because self-knowledge is made out of knowledge and knowledge alone. It's understanding, okay? But how are we going to be really focusing our mind on consciousness? There are two ways to bring the mind back to consciousness again and again. Okay, I think that's what you are referring. How I'm going to bring the mind back to consciousness. I know I'm consciousness. I can sense that there is a conscious existence shining in my intellect, in my mind. So how I'm going to hold on my attention, as you said, to consciousness. So we can do it in two ways. We can hold on our attentions on the knowledge I am Brahman by again and again bring the mind back to the teachings of Vedanta, back to those declarations of or verses or unfoldments of the Upanishads, presented by a teacher. If we bring the mind back again and again to the logic about the true, the essential nature of the jiva as consciousness, that is bringing the mind to the self. The mind can never be brought to the self as a practice because the mind is the self, okay? But the mind is still troubled by the idea that the mind is an independent principle that has its own life and it feels its limitation because it knows that it does not live forever as the body-mind complex. Okay, so the mind is still attached to this identification with the body-mind as the body-mind, and then we need to bring the mind to the teachings, the logic presented by Vedanta again and again, so that this persistent misidentification with the body-mind as the body-mind can begin loosening up and until it somehow it breaks apart. Okay, this is a way to practice it. I am Brahman. Okay, the scriptures are the best representatives of Brahman. Why? Because it was revealed by Brahman and it has the potential to reveal to the individual jiva that the jiva is Brahman. So therefore, the scriptures are the best representative. But that does not stop us from holding on to the reflex of Brahman, the reflex of consciousness on our minds. And this is the experiential approach that most yogs do. You understand? So, and it's more easily understood and captured and experienced when the mind is more calm, is more sattvic. Okay? The consciousness is shining the intellect at all times. But when the mind is like that, when the mind is depressed, and then we cannot really sense this shining consciousness. So therefore, we may develop a little bit more sattva through our practice, our yoga practices, the asanas, or any sort of meditation in which I want to produce a deep silence and peace. And then in that sattvic platform, we can sense very clearly the consciousness shining, and produce this sense of completion and peace and contentment and satisfaction, and bliss. And so we need to know that this is consciousness shining on my mind. Okay, so we can, from a practical, experiential angle, also hold on to consciousness. How? By holding on to the reflection of bringing my mind to stay attentive to my original, my true original nature as consciousness, shining on this very subtle body, this very intellect. Okay, so this is a practice that has a great value. Okay, the only problem or potential problem with this practice that most people, most meditators, they tend to become attached to that reflection of consciousness. Consciousness is going to shine and it's going to produce a very nice sense of well-beingness and peace and contentment. And a lot of people, they get attached to the sensation, to the experience, to the feel good, and they are going to neglect the knowledge, the understanding, that this consciousness being reflected on my intellect is my real nature. Therefore, I'm more interested now in retaining this clear understanding and less in enjoying the sattvic mind, because the sattvic mind produces nice experience. If the mind is still extroverted and is still too much focus on the experience, it's going to neglect the knowledge which is available when it's clearly perceived that consciousness is shining. And look at this. Wow, it feels like limitless, peaceful, pure shanti and satisfaction and so on. So it's very easy the meditator get stuck in sattva, okay? But if we go there as Vedantins, that practice has served the purpose not only to further purifying the mind, but also to allow, to create the proper sattvic environment in which this knowledge is more easily, gained and retained. You understand?
Yeah, because when I first came to Vedanta, I was all about the intellectual understanding. And then to make it real, I put that attention, that acknowledgement in. And it seems to me the both combined are just, that's my formula. And so if there's anything else, or if I've got that wrong, I'd like to know before I spend too many years on it.
I'm not sure I understood what you said now in the last 30 seconds. Can you repeat again? Before, when you came to Vedanta, what was that?
It was, I came out of the Neo world. Okay. Well, TM teacher for many years, and then to the Neo world. And the beauty of the knowledge just captured my intellect.
Okay.
And I enjoyed, and it was almost for a while some entertainment in a sense, I just found it beautiful. But then to change from the intellectual platform to the living platform, I found that the sensation of being that's always present, of course, everybody's got it, right. But unless you acknowledge it, you don't live it.
Yeah. And some people needs the experiential element to acknowledge it, and some people they acknowledge it by the intellect, by the profound intellectual understanding. Yeah. So for some people it's easier. I mean, some people requires this experiential feel, of consciousness shining in the intellect. And but as you probably you have already noticed, when we get together to do this work, this intellectual work of reflecting, contemplation, and understanding and assimilation, as we do that sometimes in a weekend, sometimes over a seminar of a few days or a week or 3 weeks, sometimes, when we do that, we can see that the mind develops a lot of sattva. Have you not noticed that? Yeah, the mind develops a lot of sattva without us having to even stop for 10 minutes a day to meditate, to produce silence. On the contrary, we activate the intellect to think aligned with the spiritual knowledge of Vedanta. Okay, when we start aligning our thinking process with Vedanta, so what we are doing, we are knocking off all those thoughts that are based on ignorance. You understand? And we are there again and again, working on Vedanta over a week, let's say. And then the mind becomes more and more sattva, without us having to meditate. Okay? So what does that say? That with Vedanta is going to establish a mind with a dominance of more sattva without having to meditate, and more efficiently. Why? Because Vedanta is not about manipulate the gunas by discipline or by sitting and meditating. So it is manipulating the gunas by understanding the very cause that produce mental disturbance, which are ragas and dveshas, that are likes and dislikes, the belief that reality It's duality, and the objects are there, and the world is real, and God is real, and I have to do this and that in order to secure, my needs and my security and so on. So with Vedanta, we go the intellectual, the knowledge, the path of the understanding, analyzing our experience in media, and by doing so, we start neutralizing, or at least we numbing, we start somehow suspending those vasanas that are constantly producing mental disturbance. And then we experience a sattvic mind without having to control the gunas by the means of discipline, which is Vipassana yoga, meditation, you understand? So I have experienced it several times when I met Ranji, and I was like, wow, I'm blissed out here in deep silence, and all I have done was to activate or educate my intellect to analyze or to think, in harmony with this scriptural knowledge. Have you not experienced that, Lynn? So that's why we like to say that a mind, a sattvic mind of the Vedantine is a mind resolved by the means of jnana. The sattvic mind of the yogi is the mind that was resolved by the means of discipline. You understand? By discipline, so meditation, until you develop a silent mind, okay? You are refusing, you are controlling your sense organs and your mind. You are not allowing it to go anywhere, and then you see that the mind begins slowing down, and then you develop more of a silent, peaceful mind. But what does that do? It really, by force, by discipline, you cultivate a silent mind. But that process never really addressed the fundamental cause of mental disturbance, which is ignorance, spiritual ignorance. Vedanta addressed the root cause of mental disturbance. Therefore, it's a direct means of resolving the mind because it addressed the fundamental cause of mental disturbance and human suffering. You understand? So it's a direct, way of resolving the mind.
Yeah, I loved what you said when you said it was numbing the vasanas.
Yeah.
Because knowledge does that. It's like the vasanas are still there. I see them operating all the time, but they don't have the oomph they used to have. They're just sort of acknowledged. There they are.
Yeah, and
I
Vedanta,
can take them or leave them.
Yeah, Vedanta is very honest. It says, you know what? This is a tough one. Ignorance is really, really tough, all pervasive, okay? Very hard to uproot. It's hardwired. It's there in the causal body, and it takes quite some effort, to overcome or to cancel those vasanas, which are there living sometimes for many births, producing mental disturbance, this running to control the life, the field, the objects, and so on. So this ignorance was there, beginningless. We have to remember, ignorance is beginningless. Okay, so we are byproduct. The universe is a byproduct of this cosmic ignorance. So to cancel it is only possible by the means of knowledge, and to cancel it permanently is only possible by the means, to cancel it permanently is only possible by the means of knowledge, and that requires quite some effort, more or less, according to one's qualifications, one's mental, emotional, intellectual purities, okay? And then this firm understanding, I am consciousness, can be quickly and rapidly and easily gained. This certainty, this conviction of self-knowledge. All depends on how developed or how mature or how pure or sattvic the mind already is. You understand? So, but in general, we say that jnana knowledge is the best, the greatest purifier of the mind. And I don't know if you heard me saying that. That was my incredible experience. I was blessed with self-recognition. One time, I used to live in Olympia, Washington, and after 30 years of search, one time when I was about giving up, but all the time with the teachings of Nisargadatta Maharaj, I was possessed by his statements here and there. And then when I least expected, when I was dressing up to go to do some shopping for my restaurant, this knowledge became clear. I am this consciousness. I knew it academically, I knew it theoretically, but it became clear. Became clear to me. The most amazing thing that happened to me, Lynn, is that the way I began to interact with the world changed completely. I did not know Vedanta, and I used to say at the time that I feel almost as if my ego and my personality has crumbled, a big chunk of that, because I respond to the world in a different manner now. I'm not as angry or irritable or explosive or upset, or I'm just cool, and I'm dealing with life in a totally different way. Why? Because self-knowledge is the greatest purifier of the mind. So in general, knowledge is the greatest purifier. Of course, the yogis, the people who believe that samadhi yoga is the only way to enlightenment, they believe that samadhi yoga is the greatest purifier. This is a debate that it's a beginningless debate between the yogis and the yanis, you understand? So both may be very, very much purifying, but the knowledge in our scripture say is the best, the greatest purifier of the mind. Why? Because it addresses the root cause of mental disturbance. And self-knowledge, once it's seen through, what this self-recognition did to me in 2011? What did it do to me that made me feel like, wow, what is going on here? It did that the moment that I saw that I was consciousness, that scene, that recognition immediately disintegrate a lot of those tendencies and vasanas to respond to the field in the same way that I was doing for the past. Somehow that seeing I am this light of consciousness fulminated, a lot of my vasanas, those ignorant vasanas, It was very, very strange. And then I can tell that farther down the road, I got in contact with Vedanta and Ranji, and this knowledge of the Vedanta has been further purifying my mind as well, my body-mind, you understand? So knowledge is a great purifier, and we need to understand that if we go the way, the experiential way with yoga, with samadhi yoga, we may experience some periods of mental resolution, but it depends on the manipulation of the gunas. It depends on me maintaining my effort to discipline my mind, not allowing the mind to go to the object. In other words, I'm going to miss out on the world, because if I allow my mind to come in contact with the world, I lose my nirvikalpa samadhi, my mental peace. The real resolution of the mind is only possible, by knowledge, because it does not depend on removing the world of object. It's freedom in spite of nature, in spite of the objects, because we cannot really. I already mentioned a friend of mine who was the last guru I met before this self-recognition took place. And for him, he used to teach, and he still nowadays, he teaches non-duality. But in fact, he teaches duality because he believes that the self is a state, and that state is gained by deep meditation. So he meditates 8, 10 hours a day. And then he says that he connects with God and he feels complete and satisfied in love and so on. But the moment he stops and he starts talking and interact, he feels limited again. His whole life now is to deny It's to prevent the mind, the body-mind, to interact with other people in the world, because the world now, it is obstructing his full appreciation of his limitless nature, or God, or whatever. So we can tell that there is no freedom that, if you take the world to be real, and then you're going to try to remove it. And Vedanta says the world is not real, therefore you don't need to remove it. Just understand your real nature and let this superimposition, because this is only in the hands of Maya Shwara, not yours, right? So that is the basic difference here. But does not stop us from doing some experiential meditation, because it feels good, it cultivates more sattva, and then once we get bored with that feel good of the reflection of consciousness in a sattvic mind, we take that mind and we turn it into the scriptural knowledge, Vedanta. Right?
Arlindo, was this discussion your second example? You gave the first example of holding your attention on the knowledge, and you said there are two ways. Were you discussing the second way?
Yeah, the first one is you because you see, we cannot really hold our attention into the self, bring our attention to the self, like Ramana used to say, and many other teachers say. We can't, because the mind is the self. So the mind only needs to understand that the mind is the self. Since the self is not an object of knowledge, not an object of perception, and not an object of focus or anything, or experience. So how I'm going to bring my mind again and again to the self? I'm going to bring my mind to the teachings of the Vedanta, which reveals to the individual that the mind is the self. So I'm going to be exposing my mind to this teaching. Oh, there is a lot of disturbance, there is a lot of ignorance operating now. I go back to my sadhana, shravana, manana, reflection, contemplation. So this is the meditation of Vedanta. But here and there, Vedanta presents Upasana Yoga sometimes as a concession to the jiva, the jiva who wants a little experience, So it presents that, okay, if you want a little bit of feel good, go to the meditation. But for that, you need to develop enough sattva, and then you're going to feel that peace and contentment and bliss, and observe that is consciousness shining in your mind, in your sattvic mind. And then you need to bring that understanding into mind, So this feel good is not the point. The point is this consciousness that is shining in my mind, and I can really easily perceive it shining. You understand? It's so easy to perceive. It shines regardless of the state of the mind, even when it's more rajasic and tamasic. Later on, you're going to notice the consciousness shining even when you're upset, even when you're depressed. You say, oh, consciousness, thanks God you did not leave me here. I'm having a hard time, I'm angry and irritated, but I am that, I am you. Okay, I'm at peace here because I know I'm not this mental condition. I'm that which shines in this mental condition. So the second is just the experiential practice of sitting, developing. The problem of enjoying this meditation on the reflection of consciousness in the mind is that you can only enjoy that once the mind is pure enough, refined enough, that in 5 minutes you sit down, you already enjoy the reflection of consciousness in your sattvic mind, because your mind is already more sattvic to begin with. You understand? The problem with meditation is that we want to meditate because we want to have a sattvic mind, a peaceful mind. But to be successful in meditation, we need to begin with already a relatively peaceful mind, sattvic mind. You understand? So if you go to meditate and your mind is too rajasic or tamasic, you are not going to experience the reflection of consciousness in your mind. And then you say, oh, this is balloon, this does not exist. You understand? This trip that reflect, yes, because the mind has to have some sattva to begin with. But as we put forth our effort to control the mind, to regulate the mind, to bring it into a quiet, peaceful condition, and then we begin experiencing this reflection of consciousness in the mind, in the intellect. I tell you exactly how it used to work for me. I begin, when I was very young, doing all kinds of bioenergetics under the name of Osho's meditations. It was more like, bioenergetic exercise with a few moments, 10, 15 minutes that we use sit silence towards the end of our practice so that we could experience at least a little peace. After many years doing that, because my mind was gross, after many, many years, and then and only then I start enjoying Vipassana meditation. Before, Vipassana would not do anything to me because my mind was too dense. So once it became more sattvic, I could enjoy Vipassana. And then over the years, my mind was refining itself, become more subtle. And then I got in contact with the teachings of the words of Nisargadatta Maharaj. And his meditation was hold on to the sense feeling, I exist, I am, I exist, which is nothing but hold on to the reflection of consciousness on your sattvic intellect, which produce the sense I am existence without superimpose my name, my form, my career, my history, or any ideas about myself. It's just I exist. Hold on to I am, I exist. Okay. So when I got into that meditation, the meditation only was working for me because my mind was already more sattvic after many years of Vipassana on top of many years of the meditations of worship. Okay? So when I started practicing this meditation of Nisargadatta Maharaj, I was like, wow, now finally enough, it's a question of 10, 15 minutes, and then I am experiencing this peace and this bliss, this silence. I was very happy. Okay, but there were days, Karen, that meditation was not working, was not clicking. And then I understood it because my mind is a little bit too agitated. And then what I used to do a step back and I say, okay, let me do 10, 15 minutes of Vipassana, okay, which is a denser practice. I'm holding my attention on the breath coming in and going out. Before I can hold my attention to the sense feeling I exist, you understand? Which is much subtler. So I used to go a step backward, do 10, 15 minutes of Vipassana, and then once my mind was a little bit more settled, and then I would switch to my Nisargadatta's meditation, and then it would used to work. Do you understand, Karen? Okay.
Yes, I do, because I've been there many times when I'm just too rajasic and just can't quiet, so, but I've just kind of instinctively gone to, okay, focus on the breath, and that helps.
Yeah, right. Sometimes even the breath would not work. I say, oh, let me go and shake my body somewhere there with the other folks, and I'll go and run and swim or doing something, So I understood one thing because I used to be so rajasic when I was young. I understood very soon in my relationship with the community of Osho that physical work would help to calm down my mind. And then I was totally into doing physical work around Osho in the ashrams. And then whenever I used to go somewhere for earning some money, I used to like better physical work because I used to exhaust some of these rajas through physicality, and then my mind would become more peaceful and ready for meditation at the end of the day, So we need to do what it takes to produce a sattvic mind and then find our way until the sattva, is properly cultivated and retained so that we can go into karma, dharma, and moksha yoga. Right? Okie dokie. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to send this satsang back to you, and I'm going to post on the Facebook because I think it's going to be a good one for a lot of people. Much
Thank you.
big hug, and we meet again
Thank you.
coming Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye, Mark.